story. HOA cops blocked me at a general's funeral till a 4-star general put them in their place. Have you ever witnessed someone so entitled? They thought their personal grievances were more important than honoring a war hero? The funeral of General Howard Gaines was meant to be a solemn ceremony to honor decades of valor, discipline, and sacrifice. Attendees ranged from high-ranking officers to young cadets, and grieving families whose lives were forever changed by his leadership. The air was thick with respect, the flag folded with care, and silence blanketed the scene like reverence itself. Until she arrived. HOA Karen real estate queen turned community activist, stormed in with all the subtlety of a firecracker in a monastery. Drenched in perfume, dressed in a hot pink blazer with rhinestone heels, she demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. Her complaint? The funeral procession had illegally blocked the road to her favorite dog spa. I've already called the city council twice, she shouted, stepping over rose petals meant for the casket. This is my neighborhood, and I won't let you turn it into a military parade. At first, the officers tried to remain calm. Sergeant Bell offered to reroute her temporarily, explaining the funeral would only last another 20 minutes. But Karen wasn't interested in negotiation. No, I know my rights. You people think you own everything. This is public property, I pay taxes, she barked, then turned to a young soldier standing near a wreath display. And you didn't look at me like that. Move these ridiculous props before someone trips. Who even was this general anyway? Another war criminal in uniform. Gasps echoed through the cemetery. Sergeant Bell, jaw tight, tried again. Ma'am, please, this man served 5 tours overseas. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. Show some respect. Karen laughed bitterly. Respect? I demand respect. I've organized neighborhood watches. I've spoken at HOA meetings. What has he done for our community lately? Dead or not, you don't get to shut down traffic for this. Then it happened. In a sudden burst of indignation, Karen grabbed one of the standing wreaths handmade by the general's grandchildren and hurled it onto the grass. Flowers scattered. The silence broke into cries. The general's widow let out a sob that cut the sky. And just as the moment teetered into chaos, a deep voice rang out from the far side of the procession. That's enough. Everyone turned. From a black car stepped General Donovan Huggisforstar, retired, but every inch a commanding presence. No bodyguards, no pomp, just medals glinting beneath his dark overcoat, and a fury simmering under tightly drawn lips. Karen scoffed. Oh, great. Another one of you. What are you gonna order a drone strike? General Hughes walked past her without blinking. He approached Sergeant Bell, saluted the casket, then turned to face the crowd, his voice gravel but unshaken. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, he said, then turned his eyes on Karen. And I will ensure it is dealt with properly. Karen rolled her eyes. Yeah? Who are you to tell me what's proper? He took a step forward. I was Howard Gaines's commanding officer for 12 years. He saved my life in Kandahar. He saved the lives of 32 men that day. What have you saved, ma'am? Karen opened her mouth to retort, but at that moment, a young man from the press, who had been filming the procession, raised his phone and tapped the screen. I've got it all, he said, walking toward the group. Video of her desecrating the wreath, shoving that soldier, and calling a Medal of Honor recipient a criminal. Wanna go viral, lady? Karen froze. You can't film me without permission. Oh, the reporter smirked. You're in a public space. You said so yourself. Gasps turned to murmurs. Several attendees began recording too. One of them, a woman in a wheelchair wearing a gold star pin, spoke up. That's my husband's funeral, and you've shamed it. Karen's face turned red, but she still tried to shift blame. I was just trying to protect my rights. This was a public disturbance. You are the disturbance, said General Hughes, his voice low now and dangerous, and you've desecrated something far greater than a road sign. A new twist arrived in the form of a quiet, tall woman in uniform, JAG Officer Lieutenant Maria Chun, who had been silently observing from the rear. She stepped forward with quiet intensity and handed Karen a paper. This is a notice of summons. You damaged federally protected memorial property during a military event. You will be investigated under federal statute. Karen's mouth fell open. Is this a joke? I'll sue you all. This is harassment. Lieutenant Chen didn't blink. You're free to sue. You're also free to face charges. Actions have consequences, ma'am. In the hush that followed, Karen's screams no longer echoed. They fell flat, drowned by the sound of folded flags, of footsteps, of a nation remembering a hero. An HOA Karen? The self-proclaimed queen of the HOA she left in the back of a squad car, flower petals clinging to her heels like reminders of everything she could never understand. What do you think? Was HOA Karen simply entitled, or did she cross a line that can't be uncrossed? How should communities deal with people who disrespect public mourning and shared grief? Let us know your thoughts below. Karen's cries echoed faintly as the squad car door slammed shut, muffling her final threats. The whir of camera shutters and quiet murmur of voices filled the air. The funeral, though violated, moved forward dignified, resilient. But the damage lingered. After the final salute, mourners gathered near the reception tent, their grief now tinged with frustration. Stories began circulating not just about General Gaines's heroism, but about the woman who had dared to stain his legacy. She's the same woman who called the cops on our 4th of July cookout, whispered an older man with a walking cane. Last month she tried to ban the ROTC drill team from using the park, said another. She says anything uniformed makes her feel militarily oppressed, someone muttered. As the wind carried petals across the grass, an unexpected voice cut through the quiet rage. I know her, said Elena Marsh, a quiet woman in her 50s, dressed in modest black. We were neighbors before she moved here. Heads turned. Elena had hardly spoken all day, but her face now held a mix of exhaustion and resolution. She wasn't always like this, Elena continued. Before her divorce, before she lost her house, Karen used to organize bake sales and bring groceries to veterans in our complex. But when her husband left her for a woman 20 years younger, something in her broke. A silence fell, not of sympathy, but of understanding. Tragedy changes people, but not everyone chooses bitterness. Still, Elena added firmly, there's no excuse for what she did today. Trauma doesn't give you permission to destroy other people's grief. General Hughes, who had quietly joined the group, nodded. Forgiveness may come later. Accountability must come first. Lieutenant Maria Chun reappeared beside him, holding her tablet. Sir, she said, several people have submitted footage. We also confirmed she breached a federal line marked by the Department of Defense. There's precedent for prosecution. Good, he replied. Let her face the consequences, quietly and completely. But not everything would stay quiet. By sunset, videos of Karen's outburst had gone viral. HOA Karen crashes hero's funeral headlined the trending tab. Comment sections filled with fury, disbelief, and even dark humor. She really said, block my dog spa at a military funeral? That poor widow. I'm shaking. Her HOA better start digging her career's grave too. Later that evening, a formal press release from the Department of Veterans Affairs confirmed that charges would be filed. 1 count of intentional disruption of a military ceremony, and 2 counts of destruction of commemorative property. But the court of public opinion was swifter. By morning, Karen's LinkedIn had been deactivated. Her real estate license was under review after dozens of complaints. Her HOA association released a formal statement. Effective immediately, Ms. Karen Whitmore has been removed from all leadership roles due to conduct unbecoming and incompatible with community values. The same community she once ruled with threats and noise complaints now turned its back. A Karen Watch group emerged on Facebook. People posted personal stories from her falsely reporting military spouses to calling animal control on service dogs at PTSD therapy events. But for all the fire online, one of the most heartbreaking responses came from General Gaines's granddaughter, Lila, just 17 years old. She posted a photo, the ruined wreath, half crushed, lying on the grass. Her caption read, "You ruined my last gift to him, but he taught me not to hate. So I'll just say, I hope someone someday shows you the kind of dignity you tried to destroy." The post was shared over 100,000 times. Meanwhile, Karen remained silent. No interviews, no statements, not even a tweet. Until, a week later, a grainy video surfaced, security footage from her gated community. It showed Karen at 2:12 a.m., tossing garbage bags into a neighbor's yard, plastic flowers, torn flags, and what appeared to be the ruined remains of the funeral wreath. People lost it. Not only had she disrespected the ceremony, she tried to erase the evidence like trash. That was the final straw. The Homeowners Association filed for a restraining order. The police added tampering with memorial items to her charges. And in a poetic twist, the neighbor whose yard she used? A retired Navy nurse. "I took care of dying Marines in Fallujah," said the nurse on local news. "Now I get to take out Karen's garbage." Life has a dark sense of humor. As the legal case moved forward, General Hughes held a press conference not to talk about Karen, but about respect, unity, and remembering why honor matters. He ended with a line that went viral. "The loudest people often have the smallest courage. Let's raise our voices, not in anger, but in memory of those who gave everything for our right to mourn in peace." That moment reset the tone. Yes, there was anger. Yes, there was grief. But there was also dignity. And Karen? She became a cautionary tale, a meme, a courtroom name, a lesson whispered at HOA meetings. What's your take? Does someone's pain justify bad behavior, or is there a line that should never be crossed? Would you forgive Karen? Or is accountability the only way forward? Karen's arraignment took place quietly, behind closed doors, but the fallout rippled far beyond any courtroom. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, not in protest, but in silence. Veterans, students, families of fallen soldiers, all standing shoulder to shoulder, holding miniature flags and wearing black. Not one of them shouted. Not one of them needed to. They simply watched as Karen exited the building in handcuffs. No makeup, no designer blazer, just a gray sweatshirt and blank eyes. A reporter approached her attorney. "Does Ms. Whitmore have anything to say to the Gaines family?" The lawyer stiffened. "We're not making any comments at this time." But that silence, once a shield, now felt like an admission. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors laid out their evidence. 3 video angles of the wreath being thrown, eyewitness testimonies from 5 military officials, and the security footage of Karen's late-night dumping spree. Then came the kicker. The results of a psychological evaluation requested by her own defense team. While Ms. Whitmore has experienced notable personal trauma, the evaluator said, there is no clinical condition that excuses her behavior. What we see instead is a pattern of narcissistic entitlement and aggressive self-victimization traits, often masked as activism or standing up for one's rights. The judge, a former Marine herself, gave no outward sign of bias. But when she delivered Karen's sentence, probation, 200 hours of community service with a veteran care unit, and mandatory public apology, her voice carried gravity. "This court recognizes your right to speak, Ms. Whitmore," she said. "But no right is greater than the dignity owed to the dead. And your actions at General Gaines's funeral were not protected speech. They were a disgrace." Karen didn't flinch. She didn't speak. Not even when the widow of General Gaines, trembling but composed, stood in court and looked her in the eye. "You hurt my family," she said. "But more than that, you reminded us that respect isn't guaranteed. It's a choice, and you chose wrong." Then she placed a single white rose on the courtroom bench and walked away. 2 weeks later, Karen appeared in a video on her personal page, forced by court order to deliver a public apology. But it was clear the performance was reluctant. "I deeply regret that my actions caused distress," she read off a note card. "I misunderstood the nature of the event and was reacting to personal frustrations." The comments exploded. "You misunderstood? A casket draped in a flag? So sorry your dog spa was inconvenienced by a funeral. Not even a real apology. Just another HOA speech." But then, something unexpected happened. A man named Marcus Delgado, a quiet Army veteran and part-time groundskeeper, uploaded a post, not of Karen, but of what she left behind. After she served 1 week of her community service at the Veterans Center, he wrote, "She asked to help with the garden. I said no at first, but she came back. 3 days in a row. No cameras. Just gloves and silence." He attached a picture Karen, on her knees in the dirt, replanting a set of memorial roses, eyes red from sun or sorrow or both. "People don't change overnight," Marcus continued. "But dirt has a way of humbling people." She didn't speak much, but she listened. Maybe that's a start. The post didn't go viral, but it spread, quietly, and people began to ask, what if shame isn't the end of the story? What if accountability can plant something better? Even so, Karen's reputation never recovered. She was dropped by her brokerage firm. Her property listings were reassigned. Clients who once praised her take-charge energy now requested distance. The local HOA, once her stronghold, voted to remove her voting rights for the next 5 years. Her name, once on every community banner, had been scrubbed from event flyers. But there were no torches, no mobs, just absence. People stopped answering her emails. Neighbors stopped waving. The silence grew roots. Then came a letter from Lila, not posted publicly, not shared online, just sent by hand to the Veteran Center where Karen still did her service. Inside it read, "You don't deserve forgiveness yet, but you deserve a second chance to earn it." That's what my grandpa would have said. He believed in redemption, but only when earned. Attached was a sketch Lila's drawing of the wreath, the one Karen destroyed, fully restored in ink and color. Karen didn't reply, but she framed it and hung it above the sink where she washed paintbrushes and garden tools at the center every week. One day, General Hughes stopped by the center unannounced. He found Karen quietly raking the garden bed, sweat on her brow, dirt on her knees. She looked up. For a moment, neither said anything. Then he spoke. "I didn't come here for closure, just curiosity." She stood still. "I don't expect forgiveness. You won't get it from me," he said bluntly. "But that doesn't mean I want you to stop." He watched her rake another patch of soil, slower this time. He looked at the sketch in the window, at the roses blooming again. Then he nodded. People remember disrespect, but they also remember growth. Just make sure you finish what you started. And he walked away. Karen kept working. No spotlight, no audience, just effort and earth. Months passed. Seasons changed. The story of Karen Whitmore faded from the trending pages. The hashtags died down. Memes disappeared, replaced by newer scandals, newer Karens. But the people closest to the story hadn't forgotten. At the Veterans Center, Karen kept showing up. No cameras, no reporters, just tasks. She weeded the garden, repainted benches, sat with old men who no longer remembered her name or remembered too well. She cleaned restrooms without complaint, served coffee without speaking unless spoken to. People were wary at first, then quietly curious. No one called her Karen anymore. They just called her Miss Whitmore. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was something human. One crisp November morning, Veterans Day, the center held a remembrance event. Modest but sacred. Karen arrived early. She set out chairs, lit candles, then stood back and watched, unnoticed, as the guests arrived. Among them, Lila Gaines. She stood taller now, older somehow, dressed in her grandfather's medals and a soft blue coat. She walked with her mother, who still wore the pain on her face but carried it with quiet pride. Karen didn't approach. She simply stood near the garden, by the wreath she'd replanted herself. Then Lila did something unexpected. She crossed the lawn, alone. No camera, no ceremony. And she stood beside Karen. They didn't speak, until Karen broke the silence. "I saw your drawing," she said softly. "I don't deserve it." "You didn't deserve to destroy the original either," Lila replied calmly. "But you're here. That counts more than some people think. Karen swallowed hard. I'm sorry. For everything. I'll never be able to. You won't? Lila cut in, but her voice was gentler now. But my grandfather used to say, courage doesn't erase mistakes, it just makes room for better ones. So, don't waste that room. Karen nodded. She didn't cry, but something settled behind her eyes. A stillness. A vow. A few weeks later, the city council invited a group of veterans and community volunteers to speak at a local event on reconciliation and respect. Karen was asked to attend not as a speaker, but to help set up. She almost declined, but something in her shifted. She went. During the Q&A, a student in the crowd asked a pointed question. How do we know people really change? The girl said. How do we forgive someone who's crossed the line? There was silence. Then the microphone passed to a quiet man in the second row. It was Marcus Delgado, the groundskeeper. He cleared his throat. I watched someone go from screaming over a dog spa to planting roses for men who didn't make it home. She still doesn't smile much, doesn't talk about what happened, but she listens. That's a start. Real change doesn't post selfies. The audience clapped. Karen stayed in the back, unseen. But her hands calloused, scarred from work, trembled slightly at her sides. Not from shame, but from hope. 1 year after the funeral incident, the Veterans Center unveiled a new memorial. A bronze plaque beside the garden that read, dedicated to the dignity of the fallen, and to the hard-earned growth of the living. It didn't have her name, but Karen had planted every flower around it. One by one, in silence. Lila was there that day. So was General Hughes. So were dozens of people who once might have crossed the street to avoid Karen. Now they nodded, said nothing, but didn't look away. Some even smiled. In time, Karen moved to a smaller house. No HOA, no power games. She took up night classes, nonprofit administration. Volunteered part-time for a trauma recovery group. Even helped fundraise for a scholarship in General Gaines's name. She never asked to be thanked. And no one offered. Because some debts are better repaid quietly. With consistency. With labor. With roots. On what would have been General Gaines's birthday, a delivery arrived at the Veterans Center. A single box wrapped in navy ribbon. No name on the tag, just a small envelope. Inside, a framed photo of the wreath. The real one, before it was destroyed. And on the back of the frame, in small handwriting, this was never mine to break, but I'll protect it now any way I can. There was no signature, but everyone knew who sent it. In the end, Karen never became a hero. She didn't get redemption headlines or viral praise, but she became something else. A warning, a lesson, and maybe just maybe gardener of her own better future. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because she did the work anyway. Every day. In dirt and silence. Now it's your turn to decide. Should someone who ruins sacred moments ever get a second chance? Can a person like Karen ever truly change, or are some scars too deep to heal? Let us know what you think. Your voice matters more than ever.